All right, our special Election Day coverage continues here on America Talks Live. I'm Bill Tucker. Be sure to get out and vote. I'm going to say that every hour I'm on television because this is a democracy. It's a republic. We need your vote. This is the way it works. You get out, you vote. Somebody wins, and then we move forward, all of us together. And speaking of together, we want you to participate in this program. So give us a call, 877-NEWSMAX. That is 877-639-7629. All right, John Zogby is sticking around. He's going to rejoin us for this conversation. And he is joined by Noah Rothman. He's assistant online editor for commentary, and Ed Berliner, host of Newsmax TV. Thank you, everybody. John, thank you for staying through the break. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Now, Noah, I want to start with you. We all know that you are not a Trump fan, and we understand your reasons why. My questions have to do with sort of, at this point, I want to talk about what happens post-election. We don't know what's going to happen right now. We'll know at the end of the day who the winner is and who isn't. But what do we do moving forward, Noah? There are a lot of people who went out and have voted for somebody, and most of them, it seems, voted for that person holding their nose. But that hasn't stopped this thing from being a nasty, personal, bitterly divisive sort of election. Where do we go from here, Noah?
Well, it's kind of hard to say without seeing the final results.
Wow.
Quite a lot depends on what that margin is, who wins, who doesn't, and by how much. Without knowing that, we can only speculate as to what the circumstances will be for the next president. As you said, whoever wins is going to be pretty well mistrusted, disliked, and not especially free to do whatever they want. So they're going to be hemmed in most likely by a Republican majority in the House and possibly by a very tight Republican majority in the Senate, or at least a very close split. So that's what I'm looking for, what the split is in Congress. If Hillary Clinton wins and she has a very limited mandate and she's got a Congress that doesn't like her and a party that doesn't like her and an American public that doesn't like her, we're going to probably come together pretty quickly based around the need to prevent the implementation of her agenda.
Yeah, and actually I've been thinking a lot about the 1960 election lately, and that has in part to do with the fact that I recently had the honor of touring the renovated Nixon Library with Ben Stein. And Ben and I were talking about the 1960 election, and we were a divided country then, and Nixon publicly made the decision not to contest a contestable election in Illinois, and we all found some way to move forward. Not that Nixon and Kennedy remained friends by any stretch. Kennedy never even invited Nixon to the Kennedy White House. But John, is that a fair sort of, not analogy, but is it a fair sort of historical comparison in looking at where we're going to be post-election this time around?
It's a fair historical contrast. I mean, there was still, an institutional consensus. Somebody wins, somebody loses.
Right.
Whoever loses bows out graciously, and life continues. And then the battle goes on in Congress, and ultimately you hammer out, some sort of compromise and consensus or whatever. That doesn't exist today. It doesn't exist here in this town in D.C. It doesn't exist in the hinterlands as well throughout the country. And so whoever wins is going to have just a miserable 4 years, I think.
Ed, the issue of emails has been much in the news lately. It's been my contention that what Comey does or doesn't do really had no impact on anybody's decision on what to do or not. You support her, you're going to vote for her. You don't like her, you're not going to vote for her. But I have to ask you, as an experienced newsman and colleague, you've looked at elections. Why have the revelations in the emails that we have seen and that we know about not had any sort of, I would expect, much bigger impact on this election than they had?
Because it's been lost, Bill. I mean, let's face it, for the last 16, 17 months, all we have been hearing is rhetoric, innuendo, rumors, insults, slamming back and forth. We haven't really heard a whole lot about issues at this point. The American public, a good portion of them right now, finds themselves bemused at what is happening. And I go back to what I said last hour. There are a lot of people, quite frankly, who are enjoying the show at this point. And that seems to be part of the problem. There aren't a lot of issues that have been talked about. I mean, honestly, if you go up to a polling place right now and ask somebody what the issues are and why they want it, and I've seen these interviews here in the last several hours, and I've heard these discussions in the last several days, they talk about, why do you want Donald Trump? Because he's a leader. Why do you want Hillary Clinton? Because she's experienced. Nobody speaks about the issues involved here and what will affect this country. The emails have been lost. It basically has become nothing more than caterwauling in the canyon at this point, because we've heard it for so long that people say, emails, gotcha, okay, hate her, she's untrustworthy, don't want to vote for her, Donald Trump is the one who's hammering away at her. We're not looking at the facts of them, and quite frankly, we've already seen that in the last week when the second piece of news came out from James Comey, finding that there's nothing there. There's no there. But did that news make as big a slice of news as it did when we found out that there were more emails? Absolutely not. We hung on it. We listened to it. The illegitimate media are the ones who continue to hammer away at that because it gave them a good talking point. The one thing, Bill, and I got to say this, that I think that this election will do for America, I'm looking at this positively, because no matter who gets elected today, this country is going to force itself to come together. We have to. You want to talk logjam? You ain't seen nothing yet when it comes down to whomever gets elected, especially if it's Hillary Clinton. You are going to have people's lives that are going to be affected, and they are going to be screaming angry at it. We are going to be forced to come together as a country. Maybe it's the best thing that could have ever happened to us, and maybe that word that John Zogby used a couple of moments ago, compromise, may actually, sooner or later, have to work its way into our governmental way of thinking.
Well, actually, I want to take this issue out with Noah. I was going to talk to him about whether we had heard issues or not, but I actually want to take up this issue of compromise. Noah, you have been opposed to Trump. You have been a never Trumper, if you will. But does it matter at the end of the day who wins this election in terms of ability to compromise? The Clintons certainly are a well-experienced political family, and you'd think they understand the politics of compromise and moving things along. Trump is a businessman. You would think in business he knows he's not going to get everything he wants and that we need to move things along. So in that regard, in terms of compromise and getting things done, aren't both of these candidates capable of doing that? Whether they'll do it or not, we don't know, but aren't they capable of it?
I'm going to say no to either one of those, frankly. I don't think either of them are especially capable of compromise, not because they don't personally understand it or appreciate it, but because the conditions are not going to be there to allow them to compromise. Look, if Hillary Clinton wins the White House, she could tear the Republican Party apart. She could absolutely exacerbate the fissions, the fractures, rather, that have existed over the course of this primary campaign by pursuing some grand bargain legislation. She could pursue immigration reform, for example, with the minority of the Republican Party in the House that supports something along those lines, a larger Democratic majority. She could probably get compromise in the Senate. She could offer up entitlements. She could fracture the party that way. All these grand bargain triangulation kind of things that Bill Clinton passed, she doesn't have the capability to do just because she's not very well trusted on her left. Her left isn't going to allow her to compromise, not Republicans. And she's probably going to pursue the same demonization strategy that Barack Obama pursued. Similarly, if Donald Trump were to get into the White House, he too would have a lot of problems on his right, and we're not entirely sure what he would pursue, frankly, and I'm not sure that they would be down the line conservative policies, so he would also encounter some resistance from Republicans in Congress. Both of them are going to be pretty well hemmed in.
Well, John, at this point, I'm just curious, don't we have at least a consensus in polling, and I don't know if there's any direct polling done on this, that the American public's tired of nothing getting done in Washington, D.C., and that there's a feeling that, guys, all of you, sit down, be grown-ups, and run a country. Is there anything that indicates maybe we would want this, that we could send a message to Washington about?
No, absolutely. You know, look, the title of my book, We Are Many, We Are One.
Right.
I have different tribes, but I find intersections among tribes that you would never think would intersect with each other. I mean, where one group will say, I'm concerned about global warming, a more conservative group will say, I'm worried about man's stewardship of God's earth. Hey, that to me says, hey, look, maybe these two guys can talk to each other and hammer out some sort of compromise on the environment. That and immigration and a whole lot of other issues. That's where leadership comes in. That's where someone who doesn't care about re-election but cares only about using his or her 4 years wisely to score some points. Can Hillary Clinton be Bill Clinton is a really good question, I think.
And I suspect that the answer is
an
unqualified
Hey, Bill,
no.
I want to get in here on something John just said, because he mentioned the word leadership in here, and I want to drive that home. because it is not only about the leadership that Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton brings to the White House. It is the leadership that our elected officials bring down the line in Congress, in the House, the mayors, everybody from the person who wants to be the guy painting the benches in the park to the President of the United States. We are lacking leadership in this country simply because, and in many ways, because we, the American electorate, we keep putting the same morons in office. We keep putting the same dilettantes in office. We keep going in and checking R, yes, no, without any sort of idea as to what we're doing. Until this country decides that they want to get actively involved in the election process, research, learn, stop giving these people the power that they use to basically laugh at us down the road, we are never going to reach that compromise point. It is up to the American electorate to do it, and we've got to show the leadership to make sure that we clean out what's happening in Washington, D.C. It's not going to happen from the top, has to start at the bottom.
Well, look, and Donald Trump has said that one of the first things he'll do in his first 100 days is, in fact, propose a terms limitation for people going into Congress, because, Jed, you're right, and we can see it in the statistics. On a good, normal year, 98% of the people running for Congress are always reelected, even though in every poll that's taken, Congress ranks somewhere below used car salesman or insurance salesman, for that matter. Noah, let's presume Trump wins this for a second. I know that there are a lot of arguments that he is not conservative enough, but do you think that he can't reach enough consensus to drive some conservative things forward? For example, on the issue of immigration, he's not trying to drive some grand piece of legislation in terms of immigration reform. What he's trying to do essentially is say cut funding off for sanctuary cities, which is not a grand thing, and he wants to build a wall. Whether he can get that wall done or not, it at least seems like a position for start a conversation with Mexico. You got about 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it's more than that. He's also running a deportation force that would require a significant amount of funding, and that border security provisions were part of Immigration Reform 2013, all of which made his right so frustrated that they allowed for Donald Trump's insurgency. So I don't think that's going to necessarily be the icebreaker we think it might be.
Dadgummit. All right, John, Noah, and Ed, thank you very much. We are going to be taking a look at Donald Trump's chances all day long. And we're going to be asking the questions of whether he can turn some blue states red. We'll talk about that next. Don't go anywhere. Meantime, don't forget to go out and vote. We need to hear from you today. And we want to hear from you on the show. 1-877-Newsmax. Give us a call. Let your voice be heard. We got another panel coming up next. Don't go anywhere.